Hello friends, this is Brad on the Saddle Rock Sports Network. Here is your Colorado six-man postseason picture show as of today, Sunday, October 27th, 2024. There were a lot of exciting games this past weekend that caused a bunch of movement in the rankings. Let's get right to it. In the top six, you'll see Sierra Grande and Idalia swapped 3 and 5 spots between last week and this week. Idalia went from number 5, 2 spots up to number 3. Sierra Grande bumped down 2 spots from number 3 to number 5. Arickaree was at number 9, but they moved up 2 spots into the number 7 spot. Caliche was at number 7. They dropped a notch down to spot number 8. The Branson Kim Bearcats had an upset win over Primero, which was the biggest ranking movement of the week, jumping a whole 4 spots from 13 all the way up to 9. Way bigger of a jump than I anticipated, even with a win in that situation. Hanover moved up 1 spot into the number 10 position. Fleming lost to Idalia this week by a pretty significant margin, which resulted in a 3-position drop down to number 11. Eads remained unchanged at number 12. Primero's loss to Branson Kim resulted in a 3-spot slide down to number 13 from the number 10 spot last week. Cheraw remains unchanged at position 14. Kit Carson moved up 2 spots with their win this week from the 17 spot into the 15 spot, which sets up a really fun matchup next week. We'll talk about this. Prairie is going to take on Kyle with number 16, number 17. Going to be a showdown on the bubble. And still possibly in the hunt, we have Pete's, Briggsdale, and Deer Trail. Now let's talk Week 10 matchups for those playoff-bound teams. Number 2 Stratton and number 3 Idalia I expect to win big over their opponents. Walsh, who only has a 1-8 record this season. Miami Yoder at a 3-5 record. Idalia and Stratton both playing very strong football right now. Number 5 Sierra Grande has a bye. They will not play in Week 10. I expect number 10 Hanover to win over Genoa Hugo, who's coming in with a 2-6 record. And I expect number 13 Primero to win over Antonito, who still is looking for their first win on the season. Now let's talk about the key matchups for Week 10. There are so many games happening between the playoff-bound teams this final week of play that it's going to make the bracket nearly impossible to predict. You're going to have number 1 Cheyenne Wells taking on number 9 Branson Kim. That should be a good matchup. It's on Branson's home field. We'll see how that one goes. Number 4 Otis is taking on number 12 Eads. Number 6 Grenada taking on number 15 Kit Carson. Number 7 Arickaree taking on number 14 Cheraw. Number 8 Caliche taking on number 11 Fleming. And finally, that showdown in the bubble, number 16 Prairie taking on Kyle. So what does all of this mean? All of these last week games between playoff-bound teams and how that could result in where they sit. Well, let's try to break that down a little bit. So a couple of stories. I believe the top 6 teams are relatively set. I don't think anybody else is going to break into that top 6 based on where they are with their RPI and Max Preps ratings combined for that final seeding selection index. We see mathematically at 0.806 and 0.801, number 4 Otis and number 5 Sierra Grande are very close. If Otis happens to lose their game this week, maybe they drop. Cheyenne Wells, if they get upset by Branson Kim, maybe they drop a spot or 2, but nobody's falling out of that top 6. There could be a little shuffling here and there, but I think for the most part, this top 6 is relatively set. Now let's talk about our first really interesting story going into Week 10 in this playoff picture. Who is going to host? You'll see on your screens position 7 down through position 12. Now remember, the top 8 teams are going to host in the first round. So really position 7 and 8, those are the hosting spots. Now you'll see position 7 has a rating index of 0.687. Position 12 is 0.639. Mathematically, that's very close. There could be so much movement anywhere in here. It's really impossible to predict. So we're not going to predict, but we will talk about potential outcomes, possible scenarios. So let's start at the top with the Arickaree, currently in the number 7 spot. They play Cheraw this week at number 14. If Rickery loses, yes, maybe they drop out of the hosting spot down to position 9 or potentially lower. Same thing with Kalichi in the number 8 spot. If they lose to number 11 Fleming, yes, they could drop out of the hosting picture, but obviously still going to the playoffs. Here's another interesting one. Number 9 Branson Kim takes on number 1 Cheyenne Wells in Branson this week. It's a long road trip. Maybe Cheyenne Wells comes in a little tired. Branson comes in with the big upset. If they pull that off, they could bump several spots up. Even if they lose, sometimes the way the math and RPIs and max preps work, a loss to a higher rated team doesn't affect you too much in max preps, and it in fact could help you in your RPI standings to lose to a team with a really good RPI. And there's no better RPI right now than the number 1 team in the state. So even with a loss, Branson Kim could possibly bump up into that number 8 spot. We'll have to wait and see. So many other things could happen. So let's talk about number 10 Hanover. If they happen to win over Miami Yoder, I don't think that's really going to improve their position much, because Miami Yoder is a lower seeded team coming in, and beating a team you expect to beat does not really improve your RPI nor your max preps rating, so don't really expect a change there. Number 11 Fleming, if they upset Kalichi, that could be a very close, well-contested game. They could bump way up into the number 8 spot. We saw them drop 3 points last week. They may gain those 3 positions back. It's anybody's guess right now. And finally, they're in the number 12 spot. A big win for Eads over number 4 Otis could result in them jumping into that number 8 spot. So who knows? It is going to be a wild and woolly one. We will definitely be watching the scoreboards all weekend long. Next big story is the bubble. This one is a lot of fun. Kit Carson, Prairie, and Kiowa right at that 15, 16, 17 spot. All 3 of them very close mathematically, 0.542 down to 0.523. Let's talk about Kit Carson. They play Grenada this week, who's at number 6. If they win, Kit Carson definitely going to secure a playoff spot. They might even bump up a notch, because that would be a major upset. Even a close loss to Grenada could result in them being safe. Like we explained with the Cheyenne Wells Branson Kim game, sometimes losing to a team that you are expected to lose to doesn't negatively impact those rating numbers. However, a big loss to Grenada this weekend could result in Kit Carson possibly dropping out of the playoff picture into that number 17 spot. Now let's talk about Prairie and Kiowa. They play this week on November 1st at Prairie. So Prairie's home field advantage, Kiowa. Both teams got a lot on the line. Winner is likely to guarantee get that number 16 spot. The loser could be out, but like we said, if Kit Carson drops or something else weird happens, the loser could still end up securing a number 16 spot, the winner getting the number 15 spot. Who really knows? This is wild and woolly, very exciting stuff. All right, so here is your bracket if it were to be played right now with the rankings right as they are. Now, next week, 1 week from today, this will be drastically different. And typically, those final bracket is not announced until the Tuesday after the regular season ends. So we'll have that to you as soon as we can. Here's the bracket right now. Cheyenne Wells would host Prairie. Kalichi would host Branson Kim. Otis would host Primero. Sierra Grande would host Eads. Stratton would host Kit Carson. Rickery would host Hanover. Idalia hosts Schraub. And Grenada would host Fleming. So that would be your bracket today if the playoffs happen exactly as the rankings are at this moment in time. But for those of us that have followed six-man football for a couple of years, we know a lot happens, especially this year in Week 10. We'll have all of it for you right here as everything develops, as those scores are posted, as those numbers change. It's going to be a whole lot of fun. Don't miss any of it right here on Saddle Rock Sports.